Welcome to this EMA Consultancy podcast. I'm pleased to be joined today by EMA's Managing Director, Anne Elliott, and Director, Ian Robertson. Today, we're going to spend some time discussing the findings of EMA's latest Total Reward and Workplace Survey. Hello, Anne. Hello, Ian.
Hello, Stuart.
Hello, Stuart.
Thanks for joining us today. Anne, I'll turn to you first. This is your annual survey looking at employee terms and conditions compiled from talking to housing associations across the UK. This survey is slightly different in that you've also taken a more detailed look at the change in workplace. Can you just explain why you changed the survey and what is the main thing that you've learned from these changes?
Okay, thank you, Stuart. The breadth of the survey has evolved over the years to reflect the changes in the external environment and the resultant issues and pressures facing housing organisations. The survey's been running now for nearly 10 years, and we've experienced lots of changes since then. The tail end of the banking crisis, the rent cuts, the pandemic, and now the cost of living. Quite understandably, the last 2 to 3 years has seen the most changes and the more debate about the future of work, which we will be completing more work on as we move forward. Due to these changes, we're finding that the responses to the questionnaire are less to do with pay, terms and conditions. We've seen more responses in the last 2 years, in particular relating to the whole employee experience, including induction, organisation culture, leadership and management, flexible working, hybrid working, health and well-being of staff, etc. It continues. Housing associations and generally housing organisations now have a more tailored reward package in place to address the different generational motivators and expectations. We have more different generations in the workforce than ever before. And we now have Gen C, Generation COVID, as it's termed, entering the workforce, and they will again have different aspirations.
I've actually gone through the survey and there are some fascinating results in there. One thing that really stands out for me is that almost a third of housing associations, or those who responded, said they'd seen a major increase in staff turnover. It does appear that the turmoil of the last couple of years has continued to impact on the workplace. Ian, I'll put this question to you. What do you interpret from the report's findings?
Can I start from a positive perspective and state that 2/3 have seen minimal change in their employee turnover, but I think it's important to recognise that a third of organisations have seen a significant increase in their employee turnover. I think this is down to a combination of factors that have driven this. The first one is that we are seeing older people choosing to retire early. By older people, I mean 50 plus. And there's increasing evidence that this is changing with the cost of living crisis, and the older staff are now coming back into the workplace. So this should address some of the staff employee turnover issues. The second one is more job opportunities for staff to consider outside their organisation. The predominant factor in this appears to be salary. We've got many examples where people have left for salaries offering £10,000 to £15,000 more. I think one other factor that's driving the point, particularly in the southeast, is where staff are looking for opportunities in London, where they know they will be paid additional money to travel to London, only knowing that they will be doing this a few times a week. So that's from their perspective. But I think one factor is absolutely clear. To retain and attract staff, you need to offer hybrid working, even for very senior positions these days.
So, Ian, that's some interesting thoughts there, really, isn't it? I know when we had this discussion last year, after last year's survey, hybrid was up there, but it's almost adapted again to the new world circumstances that we're facing. You know, you've thrown in there the cost of living crisis. What's the impact on salaries from that? So let's just move on to the next question. The sector is certainly grappling with making workplaces fit for purpose for the long term in probably what we're calling the post-pandemic world. We've heard a lot about the hybrid office, as you've just mentioned, being the way forward, but it seems to me, and having looked at the results in the survey, it's still presenting challenges in terms of culture and the overall employee experience. I think one thing I picked out, the survey reported that 57% of organisations reported an adverse impact on staff wellbeing post-pandemic. So what do you see as the main challenges being here? Ian, I'll just put that question to you.
Again, one of the positives come from the pandemic is improved work-life balance through this hybrid working. But it's not for everybody, and some staff do not engage with hybrid working and they want to be back in the workplace. The wellbeing concern has been driven by staff not being able to work with others and develop bonds, which has an impact on their mental health. And we are seeing several things come from that. The first one is a feeling of isolation and detachment. And what I mean by that is work gives us a sense of shared purpose and a connection with other people. no matter what industry you're in, a workplace is a community. However, when team members are on their own, they start to feel isolated. They can lose sight of the company vision and disengage with their workplace. The result is a feeling of detachment and isolation, and this will have an impact on well-being. The second one I'd like to talk about is anxiety and mental health issues. The implications of the pandemic on mental health has been astronomical. Most people, no matter their age, background, gender, have been afflicted with feelings of fear, sadness, worry, frustration during this difficult time. And not to give you any gloom here, but I think the cost of living crisis could have a similar impact as COVID did. One other factor is unclear expectations. In the old-fashioned workplace, it was easy for a manager simply to drop by your desk and let you know you're doing a good job. In today's high-octane remote environment, many people are no longer getting that kind of regular feedback and reassurance they need. But on the plus side, I think there are some benefits that we're seeing. The first one is work-life balance, which I mentioned earlier. But the second one is in trust for staff to do a good job. The managers have to trust individuals, and I think staff are giving that back in bucket loads.
I think what is coming out of our discussion today is that the social housing sector faces a more complex and fragmented set of challenges. You've talked about the difficulties around recruitment and retention. I see the survey also picked up on the cost of living crisis. How much impact do you think this will have on recruiting and keeping staff? And how do you think pay and reward strategies will have to change? Anne?
This area is developing as we speak. 1 year ago, who would have thought inflation would be 10% plus? And now we find out today the energy cap will be over £3,500. Organisations need to be competitive, but they also need to think about their customers and the public perception. And they now need to think about the rent settlement, which may be set by the regulator. Organisations will need to keep reviewing their position to ensure they're competitive when it comes to reward packages, and they need to adapt quickly if required. This might include increasing the pay for staff, but be careful of equal pay issues. This might also include a one-off cost of living payment to show you care as an employer. I also think there'll be more of an onus on culture and leadership moving forward. Both employees and, let's face it, customers have been through a very difficult and stressful time. Company culture and leadership needs to connect more emotionally with staff, so they feel more of an attachment to the organisation. I think the last 3 years has led to a requirement for a more humane and compassionate leadership to engender trust and loyalty from employees. During the pandemic, we've seen a shift from pay and moving more towards the importance of flexibility, hybrid working, health and well-being initiatives. Employees are asking, how do I make work part of my day and not the whole day? With the continuing cost of living crisis and the news about the energy cap this morning, this may well change back to the importance of pay and benefits again. We're starting to see employees leave, as Ian has mentioned previously, to obtain more significant pay increases. There is also some evidence that employees are looking to avoid significant travel costs and looking for more of a hybrid working arrangement. Indeed, we're seeing employees leave if they're denied a hybrid working arrangement.
Thanks, Anne. Well, that certainly gives us a lot to think about. Probably worth exploring further. So I know you're holding a webinar with other social housing experts to focus on how the sector recruits and retains in the face of these mounting challenges. For our listeners, the webinar is called Stop the Talent Drain, and it's taking place on October the 4th. Details are on the accompanying post for this podcast and will be on our social media channels. Thanks for listening today, and thanks, Ian, and thanks, Anne.